Let's begin by finding a comfortable position. Allow your body to settle into the space you're in, whether it's the bed, the floor, or any surface supporting you tonight. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel yourself gently sinking into the support beneath you. With every breath, feel a little more grounded, a little more connected to the earth beneath you, holding you. Deep, smooth, and soft breath in supporting you. You are safe. You are supported. Now, bring your awareness to your body. Notice any areas where tension might still be lingering. Perhaps it's in your feet, your legs, your belly, or your chest. Wherever it is, let that tension melt away. With each exhale, imagine releasing it, letting go, allowing your body to relax even deeper. Now, take a moment to simply be here. The day is behind you. Whatever happened earlier today or will happen tomorrow, those things are far away for now. Right here, right now, you are in a space of peace. Let your thoughts come and go like clouds drifting by in the sky. No need to hold on to them. Just notice them and let them float away. Feel the present moment fully. This is your time, your space. You have nowhere else to be right now. Allow yourself to sink deeper into this peace, deeper into the present moment, letting go of all distractions. Perhaps as you settle deeper into this stillness, you begin to feel a sense of gratitude for the comfort of your body, for the shelter you have tonight, for the breath that flows effortlessly in and out, for this opportunity to rest, to reset. Allow that gratitude to fill you, softening your heart even more. Now, imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Perhaps you find yourself walking along a quiet path surrounded by nature. Maybe a forest, a meadow, or a gentle stream nearby. Whatever comes to mind, let this place be full of calm and serenity. Feel yourself embraced by the beauty and peace around you, the air fresh and the sounds soothing. Take a moment to check in with your body once again. It has carried you through the day and now deserves this time to rest. Let any last bits of tension dissolve, leaving you completely relaxed and at ease. And now, with your body settled and your mind at peace, allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation. As your breath slows, as your body softens, you are ready for tonight's sleep story to begin. There is a village that no one visits on purpose. You don't go there by road, and there are no signs. Sometimes it appears on old maps drawn by candlelight, maps that crackle at the edges when you touch them. Sometimes it turns up in the dreams of cartographers or in the margins of books no one reads anymore. But if you do find it, and only if you are not really looking, the path to Winderley appears like a secret unfolding. It will be a narrow path, with moss growing between the stones, and birds that stop singing as you pass, as if holding their breath. The village rests quietly in a place where the forest bends to meet the river, where the trees lean in like curious listeners, and the river hums lullabies in languages forgotten by time. It is a place that smells of damp wood, old books, and distant bread. The houses are odd in the best way. Made of stone and timber, yes, but no two alike. Some are crooked like old backs. Some have towers too small to stand in and windows shaped like moons. The roofs are overgrown with moss, not by neglect, but by invitation. Flowers bloom from gutters. Vines write poems across the walls in green and gold. No one seems in a hurry in Winderley. Not the people, not the animals, not even the clocks, which tick only when you listen to them and often skip ahead or fall behind when no one is watching. Evening is when the village shines brightest. Hearts flicker to life behind old glass panes. Smoke rises in lazy spirals. The air fills with the scent of pine and stew, and the kind of bread that always reminds you of someone you loved once. Children chase fireflies along cobbled paths, giggling like secrets. Old men with wild eyebrows and women who wear too many rings sit outside and tell stories that no one believes but everyone remembers. They speak of the forest as if it is alive, not in the way trees are alive, but alive in the way some stories are. Alive in the way a dream seems to know you're dreaming. And then there is the river. It does not rush. It meanders like a thought, trailing starlight on its back. They say it never dries, not even in the driest summers. And if you whisper your wishes into its ripples, they go somewhere. Not always where you expect, but always where they need to go. On the furthest edge of the village, where the ivy grows thickest and even the birds sound quieter, there is a cottage that looks more like a large mushroom than a house. It has purple wisteria growing like a waterfall from its roof, and a chimney that leans a little too far left, like it's listening. That cottage had been empty for years until today. Elia arrived just before twilight. She stepped off the old cart that had brought her from somewhere else. She wasn't sure where anymore. Her boots were muddy. Her coat was too big. She clutched the suitcase that rattled softly when it moved. She was not a sad child, not exactly, but there was something faded about her, like a photograph left in sunlight too long. Aunt Maven met her at the gate. She didn't say much, just offered a cup of something warm and said, "There's a room upstairs. It has a window that listens." And that was that. Elia didn't know this yet, but the village knew her. It had been waiting. Somewhere deep in the orchard behind the house, something stirred. It was not quite a sound and not quite a shadow. It was older than both. It shifted, like the first breath after a long sleep. Something had been asleep. Now it was beginning to wake. Elia did not sleep well her first night in Winderley. The bed was too quiet, too soft, too unfamiliar. There were no city sounds, no hum of traffic, no distant sirens, not even the dull glow of street lights peeking through curtains. Instead, there were crickets with perfect timing, owls with opinions, and the occasional creak of the house settling its bones. Sometime after midnight, the wind began whispering against the window. Not howling, whispering. Elia couldn't understand the words, but they were there, brushing the glass like a lullaby half remembered. When she woke again, it was morning, and sunlight spilled through her window like someone had tipped over a jar of honey. It made dust motes dance, slow and golden. She dressed without rushing. There was nowhere she had to be, and padded down the stairs barefoot, the wood warm beneath her feet. Aunt Maven was in the kitchen, humming to herself and stirring something in a pot that smelled faintly of cinnamon and leaves. "There's bread on the table," her aunt said without turning around, "and the butter knows what to do." Elia blinked at that, but found a thick slice already cut, still warm, and a butter dish that, well, shimmered a little when she touched it. After breakfast, she wandered outside. The cottage garden was a riot of plants that had long ago decided to grow however they pleased. There were no neat rows or tidy borders. Lavender fought for space with wild roses, and some kind of vine was scaling the bird bath with unreasonable ambition. Bees bobbed lazily in and out of view, and somewhere a black cat blinked at her from behind a sunflower, then vanished. Elia followed a narrow path between tangled hedges, letting it lead her. It wound behind the house and down a small slope, through trees that grew denser and older the further she walked. The air changed too, cooler, greener, as if she had stepped into a breath that had been held for a very long time. That's when she saw the wall. It was low and moss-covered, made of stone so old it had forgotten its shape. Ivy wrapped around it like a blanket. There was a gate set into the wall, or at least there was now. She was almost certain it hadn't been there the day before. It wasn't a grand gate. In fact, it was rather small, more arch than doorway, made of twisted iron that curled like vines or sleeping snakes. It was closed, but not locked. A faded wooden sign hung crookedly from one hinge. The words on it had almost disappeared, except for two. Not yet. Elia tilted her head. She reached out and touched the gate. It was warm. Not from the sun. There wasn't any here. Not really. This warmth felt old, familiar. Behind the gate was something she couldn't quite see, not clearly. A tangle of trees and shadows. Maybe orchard trees. Maybe not. There was a scent on the air, just faint. Apples, maybe. Or something older than apples. She didn't open the gate? She thought about it. Her hand hovered near the latch, but something in her, not fear exactly, but instinct, told her this wasn't the right time. The sign agreed. So she turned and walked back, and when she glanced over her shoulder, the gate was still there, but perhaps a little further away than before. That afternoon, Elia asked her aunt about the orchard. Maven was darning a pair of socks with silver thread. She didn't look up. "There hasn't been an orchard behind this house for years," she said. "But there's a gate." Maven nodded, as if that answered everything. "Can I go in?" "Not yet," her aunt said. Then she smiled, but it wasn't entirely a cheerful smile. Things open when they're ready, and when you are. Elia wasn't sure what that meant. Adults had a way of saying things like riddles in this place. Still, she felt not frightened, not really, just curious. Curious and calm, like when you turn a page in a very old book and something stirs beneath the words. That night, before bed, she looked out her window toward the trees. The moon was out, round and full, as if watching. And though she could see no movement, no change, she could feel something breathing out there in the dark. Not a monster, no. Something older than monsters. Something gentle and slow and waiting for her. On the third day in Winterly, Elia woke with a feeling. Not a thought, not a dream, just a feeling. Like something had been watching her sleep. Not in a frightening way, more like a cat waiting for you to notice it. The morning was quiet. A quiet that wasn't empty, but full. Full of whispers just beyond hearing. The kind of silence that holds its breath. Elia slipped on her boots and coat and stepped outside without telling anyone where she was going. It didn't seem necessary. Winderley didn't seem like a place where people got lost. The path to the gate was easier today, or perhaps the path had decided she was ready to walk it again. The wall was still there. The gate too. The sign still said, "Not yet," but the wood looked a little less faded now. Almost as if the words had been painted again while she slept. Elia sat on the grass before it, not crossing, not knocking, just waiting. Sometimes doors need to be watched before they open. The air smelled of damp earth and green things. Somewhere far off, a bird called out in a voice like a question no one had answered. Elia rested her chin on her knees and breathed in the silence. And then she saw it. Not behind the gate, not yet, but to the side, tucked in the base of an old ash tree whose roots curled up like reaching fingers. There, in a hollow just the size of a loaf of bread, was a book. It wasn't dusty or forgotten looking. It looked like it had been placed there that morning, like it had been meant for her. Elia pulled it gently from the hollow. It was a journal, bound in cracked green leather with a brass clasp shaped like a leaf. When she touched it, the clasp fell open with a sound like a sigh, and the book opened in her lap as if it had missed being read. Inside were drawings, detailed sketches of flowers, birds, and strange fruits she didn't recognize. Each image was annotated in a looping, old-fashioned script. Bloomshade only opens beneath a full moon. Glassberries, taste of forgotten names. On the next page there was a map, not of the village, but of something that looked very much like an orchard, except it wasn't labeled orchard. It was labeled the listening garden. Beneath the map, someone had written in pale ink, "The gate does not open until the heart does." Elia closed the book and sat very still. She could feel her heartbeat, soft and steady. Something inside her was turning, like a key inside an old lock. She wasn't sure what door it would open, but she felt it. She returned to the house as the sky began to gray. Maven was sitting in the garden, feeding breadcrumbs to a crow with one white feather. Without looking up, she said, "You found it then?" Elia didn't answer. Not yet. She held the journal tight to her chest, like something both fragile and important. Her aunt smiled. "Things find you here," she said, "when they're ready, when you are." That night, Elia opened the book again under the covers, reading by the glow of a candle stub tucked into a chipped teacup. As she traced the pages, the drawings seemed to shimmer, almost move. She could almost hear things. Wind in the trees, soft bells, a voice like a lullaby, long forgotten. At the back of the journal, there was a note, handwritten, crooked, careful. "If you're reading this, then I was like you once. Something was missing, and I didn't know what until I stepped through. The trees remember. The garden listens. Don't be afraid of what you'll find. It's only the parts of you that forgot how to grow." Elia closed the book and blew out the candle. Outside, beneath her window, the wind shifted, and somewhere, just faintly, a gate creaked open. The next morning, the world felt quieter than usual. Not silent, the birds still sang, The wind still rustled, but as if everything had paused to see what she would do next. Elia rose before the sun had finished climbing over the hills. She dressed without thinking, her hands moving like they already knew what she would need. She tucked the journal into the satchel her aunt had left by the door, as if expecting this moment. She stepped outside. The path to the orchard was already waiting. No brambles today, no fog. It was clean, clear, and glistening with morning dew. Leaves above her shifted, though there was no wind. The trees were watching again, not with eyes, but with presence. When she reached the gate, it was open, just a little, just enough. The sign that once said, "Not yet," had vanished. The iron latch glowed faintly, not with heat, but with attention. Elia hesitated. She took a breath, then another, and stepped through. The world beyond the gate was not what she expected. It didn't feel like a garden or an orchard. It felt older, deeper, like something planted not in the soil, but in the spaces between memories. The trees here were tall and twisted in beautiful ways. Their trunks gnarled like the handwriting in old letters. Some bore fruit that shimmered faintly, even in shade. Apples the color of storm clouds. Pears shaped like teardrops. Branches hung low as if inviting her to reach but not press. There were sounds, but not loud ones. The rustle of leaves with meaning. The creak of bark that had something to say. Somewhere a chime rang once, distant and perfect. Elia walked slowly. There were paths, but they didn't go in straight lines. They looped and spiraled, crossed back over themselves, led to nowhere and everywhere. The journal called it the listening garden. And it was listening now. She knelt beside a patch of tall grass where a broken stone bench waited beneath a silver blossom tree. Someone had left a ribbon tied to a branch. The ribbon fluttered without wind. She untied it gently and tucked it into her pocket. Further on, she passed a pool no larger than a bird bath, its surface still as glass. When she looked into it, she saw her face, but not quite as she was now, younger, smiling, freckled maybe. Her reflection blinked at her, then faded. There were no animals in the orchard, but there were presences. Small shifts in the air, faint impressions in the soil. Footsteps that began but never ended. A feather with no bird. A laugh that echoed once and didn't come back. And at the center of it all stood a tree larger than any other. It was neither an apple tree nor a pear tree. Its leaves were dark green at the edges and pale gold near the heart. Its bark shimmered like wet stone beneath moonlight. Elia stepped toward it. At its base was a wooden sign carved in swirling, ancient script. She could only read a few words. Tree of echoes. Speak only what must be remembered. Elia didn't speak, not yet. But she sat beneath the tree, her back to the trunk, the journal in her lap. And for the first time since she arrived in Winderley, she felt not safe exactly, but rooted. Like she belonged not just in the village, not just in this orchard, but in this strange moment where the past was gently waking and the future was watching from the leaves. She would return tomorrow and the next day. There were pages to turn, voices to remember, a garden to grow, and somewhere in the branches above, something began to hum, a lullaby, a memory, a story beginning again. The next day, it rained. Not a storm, just a soft, thoughtful kind of rain. The kind that makes windows hum and stones shine. It tapped gently on the roof of Maven's cottage like a polite guest asking to come in for tea. Most children would have stayed inside. Elia did not. She pulled on her boots, wrapped herself in a coat far too big. It belonged to someone else once, but now it smelled like her, and walked toward the orchard, the journal tucked beneath her arm and a strange warmth growing in her chest. The gate was open when she arrived. It no longer creaked. It welcomed. Rain hissed softly against the leaves as she stepped inside, and the orchard closed behind her, not with force, but with familiarity, like a room pulling its curtains shut. Today, the trees looked different, not in shape. They still twisted like forgotten thoughts and hummed with a stillness that felt older than time. But in color, the leaves shimmered with silver drops. The branches swayed in slow rhythm, not to the wind, but to something deeper, and Elia could hear them. Not with ears exactly, but something within her, something quiet and deep, began to notice the words hidden in the rain. She passed a tree with bark that looked like spirals carved by wind. As she moved near, she heard a voice, no louder than a breath. She wore blue shoes, always. The voice faded. Elia stopped, staring at the tree. There were no carvings, no speakers, just the rain and the green and her own heartbeat. Further on, another whisper drifted past. He left the letter beneath the third stone. It's still there. She followed the path slowly, listening. Not all trees spoke. Some simply breathed. Others wept gently, not in sorrow, but in remembering. It was the orchard, she realized. The trees held memories, not just their own, but the echoes of everyone who had ever walked beneath them and dared to speak aloud what was meant to last. She reached the tree of echoes again. Rain fell around it, but not upon it. Its branches seemed to bend above her like an umbrella made of light. Elia sat down beneath it, opened the journal, and turned to a blank page. She began to write. I don't remember my father's voice, only the way he tapped the table when he thought. 3 fingers, tap, tap, tap. My mother wore a blue shawl the day she left. She didn't look back. I was angry, but I didn't know what at. I think it was the silence. As the words settled onto the page, something stirred in the orchard. Leaves shivered. A bird she hadn't seen before, silver and silent, landed on a branch above her, watching. Then, very softly, the tree behind her whispered, Now we remember too. Elia blinked. She hadn't spoken aloud, but the orchard had heard her anyway, not just the words on the page, the feeling beneath them, the ache, the wonder, the quiet wish for something to grow where something else had been lost. She looked up at the tree, unsure what to say, and the tree, being a tree, said nothing else. It didn't need to. It had listened. That was enough. Elia returned every day after that. She came when the wind was soft and when it blew strange. She came when the sky was clear and when it rained sideways. The orchard never turned her away. It shifted slightly like a cat rearranging its limbs to make space for her. Each time she brought the journal, each time the trees remembered more. And on the 7th day, the orchard gave her something back. It began as a flicker, not a light exactly, but a noticing, a shimmer that caught in the corner of her eye as she passed a row of trees with bark like cracked glass. Elia paused. She waited. The orchard, when it wanted to, showed you things. At the base of one tree, where roots knotted like sleeping serpents, there was a hollow. Not the same kind of hollow where the journal had waited. This one was smaller, almost shy. And inside, tucked beneath a curl of bark, was a button. It was green, worn, threaded with a bit of blue string fraying at the end. Ordinary, perfectly, impossibly ordinary. Elia picked it up, and suddenly she was 7 years old again, standing in her grandmother's garden, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big, the wind biting at her cheeks. Her grandmother was laughing, not at her, but because of her, and that laugh, high and crackling like fire, wrapped around her like a hug. And Elia was spinning in the coat, the button flying off, bouncing once, twice, and gone. She'd forgotten it years ago. The coat had been passed on, the garden overgrown, her grandmother gone. But here it was, the button, waiting in the roots of a tree that remembered. Elia closed her hand around it and felt something ache. Not painfully, but deeply. The ache of remembering something beautiful you thought you'd lost forever. She turned to the journal and wrote one sentence. The orchard keeps what the world forgets. And from then on, she began to look. There was a fork tangled in the vines that tasted faintly of strawberry jam. A broken glass's arm with initials carved inside. A paper bird folded from a train ticket with no name. Every object hummed, quietly, but certainly, like the feeling you get when you say a name you haven't spoken in years. Each thing told a story. The orchard was full of them. A library with no shelves. A memory palace with moss-covered walls. A pocket full of lost things. That night, Elia returned home with the button in her coat pocket. She didn't tell her aunt, not yet. Some things had to be kept quiet, like wishes or stars just before they fall. But she dreamed of buttons and gardens and laughter that sounded like firelight. And when she woke, she found the ribbon, the one she'd taken on her first day, tied around her wrist in a perfect knot she hadn't made. On the 7th day, the orchard gave Elia a story. Not just a memory, a whole story. It began with a path she hadn't seen before, narrow, woven with violet petals that hadn't fallen from any nearby tree. They pulsed faintly like embers in twilight. The path led her in a spiral, tighter than usual, until she came to a tree she hadn't yet met. It was slender and pale, almost silver. The bark felt cool, even in the sun, and its branches bent low, as though whispering secrets to the ground. Hanging from one branch was a length of twine tied in a loop, and from that loop a tiny satchel swayed gently, though there was no wind. Elia reached up and opened it. Inside were 3 things. A folded piece of yellow paper, stained at the edges. A hair ribbon, once red, now sun-faded. A tiny glass bead that shimmered purple, then blue, then not at all. She sat down on the earth and unfolded the paper. It was a letter. The writing was slanted, small, like someone had written it in a hurry but with care. The ink had run in places, but most of it was still legible. To the one who finds this, my name was Aster. I came here when I was 12. I didn't mean to. The orchard called. I thought I was lost, but really I had been forgotten. There's a difference. I left a shadow here, on purpose. You'll know it when it finds you. If you're reading this, the orchard is awake again. Take care of it. It remembers what we forget. It forgives what we hide. There was no signature, just the paper, soft with time, and a faint scent of lavender or something like it. Elia traced the ribbon between her fingers. It felt warm, familiar in the way lullabies sometimes are. She tucked it into her journal with care. Later, as she walked through the orchard again, the air felt different, as though someone was walking beside her, someone she couldn't quite see. The leaves whispered a name she couldn't make out. And then, at the far end of the orchard, near a stone she didn't remember, she saw it, a shadow. It didn't move. It didn't flee. It simply stood. The shape of a girl, her head tilted slightly as though listening. Elia didn't run. She approached slowly, her breath quiet, her hands still. The shadow didn't speak, but it bowed its head once and vanished like mist caught by sunlight. Elia stood alone again, but not lonely. That night, she wrote in the journal, "The orchard keeps more than objects. It keeps people too. The ones who needed time. The ones who needed to be remembered by something kinder than the world." It was the kind of morning that hung heavy with mist. The village of Winderley was veiled in soft gray, as though someone had pulled a curtain across the sky. The trees whispered lower than usual, and even the crows spoke in hushed clicks and mutters. Elia rose early, though she hadn't truly slept. She dreamed of the girl made of shadow, of soft footsteps behind her, of letters that vanished when read. But the moment she stepped out her door, the dreams scattered like moths at sunrise. Today, the orchard felt solemn, still welcoming, still watchful, but not playful, like it had drawn its breath in and wasn't sure whether to hold it or speak. Elia passed beneath the gate, now wide open, and made her way along the path that wasn't there yesterday. The orchard did that sometimes, rearranged itself like a house remembering old furniture. At the center of a grove she'd never seen before stood a small wooden structure, not quite a tower, not quite a shrine. It was barely taller than she was, wrapped in ivy that shimmered pale gold in the light. At its top hung a bell. It was shaped like a teardrop, made of copper that had tarnished into a soft sea green. A rope hung beside it, frayed and swaying ever so slightly. Elia reached out. She didn't ring it. Not yet. There was a bench nearby, sunken into the earth and cushioned in moss. She sat, waited. After a while, she noticed the carvings. The wood of the bell tower was etched with names. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were neat, others jagged. Some had years beside them. Others just stopped. Near the bottom, written in a hand she recognized from the journal, was one name, Aster. And below that, in smaller letters, "For what we left unsaid." Elia sat in silence, staring at the bell. There was no wind, yet the rope twitched faintly, as though waiting. She stood, walked closer. The orchard seemed to still further, and then she pulled. The bell did not ring. It didn't swing. It didn't hum. It didn't echo. But something else happened. She heard it inside her, not with her ears, but in her chest. A deep, soft vibration that moved through her ribs and into her bones. Like the memory of a song, like someone speaking her name in a dream. It shook loose a sadness she didn't know she'd been holding. And with it came a voice. What would you say if they were listening? Elia closed her eyes, and she spoke. I forgive you for leaving. I forgive you for the silence. I'm sorry I didn't understand then, but I do now. A little more, anyway. The bell shimmered just once, like a coin tossed into water. When she opened her eyes, the mist had thinned. Sunlight was touching the leaves again. The rope hung still, and for the first time, she felt like she had rung the bell, just not in the way bells are usually rung. The orchard had heard. That was enough. She left a note beside the bench, tucked under a stone. For anyone else who needs to speak and doesn't know how. The bell will listen, even if it doesn't ring. There was a place in the orchard that Elia had never reached before. She had walked many paths, the ones with wild violet petals, the ones with echoing laughter, even one that led her in a perfect circle until she stopped trying to leave. But this one waited. It did not appear until the 9th day. The path was quiet and narrow, and only visible when the sun passed behind the clouds, as if the light had to blink for it to show itself. It curled behind a patch of ferny underbrush, and through an archway made of 2 leaning trees, one gnarled and bone white, the other black and smooth as ink. Beyond the arch, the orchard changed. The trees were younger here, not small, but new. Their bark was soft and unscarred. Their leaves were a brighter green, their roots still unsure of themselves. And yet the air was heavier, not with sadness, but with possibility. Elia stepped carefully. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. The trees whispered again, but differently now. They weren't repeating what had been. They were imagining, dreaming aloud. One said, maybe one day. Another replied, if only someone dares. She passed a branch where a cocoon swayed gently. Not yet a butterfly, not yet anything, but full of becoming. And then she found the stone. It was smooth, flat, and embedded in the earth at the center of a clearing. Words had been carved into its surface, not by hand, but by time. All things that grow begin with being broken. Elia sat beside it. The sun broke through the trees and bathed the clearing in soft gold. She took the journal from her satchel. It opened to a blank page on its own, as if ready. From her pocket, she drew the ribbon. The button, the letter from Aster, and now the seed. She didn't know where the seed had come from. It had simply appeared this morning on her pillow, pale silver, shaped like a tear, warm to the touch, unmistakably hers. She knelt at the edge of the stone and dug a small hole in the soft soil. She placed the seed inside, covered it gently, waited. Nothing happened, not at first. But Elia understood by now that the orchard did not bloom on command. It bloomed when remembered, when listened to, when loved. So she whispered into the soil, "Grow into something kinder than what came before. Grow slow and strange and wild, but grow." The earth trembled, only a little, like a held breath finally exhaled. A green shoot emerged, no larger than a blade of grass, but shimmering, alive, a new story beginning. Elia sat back, smiling for the first time in days. Not just in her mouth, but in her bones. And far off she heard the orchard sigh, not in sadness, but in peace, like a garden that had been waiting for someone to plant again. The last day came like a whispered secret. There was no announcement, no dramatic wind or lightning, no golden sign hung in the sky. Just a morning that felt a little more awake, as if the world had brewed stronger tea than usual and was sitting quietly, waiting for her to take the next step. Elia rose before the first bird sang. The sky was still gray, the kind of gray that holds every color you can't see yet. She dressed without speaking. Maven met her at the doorway. "Today's the day," her aunt said. Elia nodded. "Do you know what it is?" she asked. Maven smiled, that half smile of people who know more than they say. "No," she said, "but the orchard does, and that's enough." Elia walked the now familiar path toward the orchard, passing trees that felt more like old friends. The gate stood open, and the wind for once followed her in. The orchard had changed again. It wasn't smaller or larger, not brighter, not darker, just fuller, as if it had finished a breath it had been holding for years. The path brought her back to the stone where she'd planted the silver seed. It had grown. Now a small tree stood in its place, slender, quiet, and humming softly. Its bark shimmered in moonlight even though it was morning. Its leaves were the same color as the sky just before snow. Quiet, unsure, but beautiful. Elia reached out and placed her palm against its trunk. The tree shivered, then settled. And around her, the orchard began to remember out loud. She heard laughter echoing through the trees. Hers, from the day she first saw the gate. The voice of Aster, faint and kind, saying, The orchard will keep you safe. She saw shadows moving, not ghosts, but footprints of moments, a child skipping, an old woman whispering to a flower, a boy crying into the soil. The trees pulse gently with memory, not just of sorrow, but of healing, of letting go, of growing wild and strange and soft. And then a door appeared, not a gate, a door. It stood alone, built of rough wood, painted a green so deep it was nearly black. There was no handle, but Elia didn't need one. She walked to it, turned, looked at the orchard one last time. "I'll come back," she said. The wind rustled, a leaf fell, and from deep within the trees, a voice said, softly but clearly, "You always do." Elia stepped through the door and found herself at the edge of the village, just outside her aunt's cottage. The birds were singing, the sun had risen, and her satchel was full, heavier than she remembered. Inside were the journal, the ribbon, the button, a leaf that shimmered like silver. One more thing, a seed, new, unplanted, waiting. She looked at the garden and smiled. Then, without a word, she knelt by the window and pressed the seed into the earth. The orchard, after all, was not a place. It was a promise.